From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom here on Can TV on a week that is just saturated with important news, not the least of which is that our mayor has been in office for only 100 days, just a mere 100 days, and he's solved more problems than you can imagine. We've seen the checklists, and we'll go over those checklists on the program here today, as well as a few other things. Joining us today, Nora Ferrell for the first time on the program. Nora is the Vice President of the Community Media Workshop. Very happy to have you with us today. And also, old friend of the show, Sarah Karp, back here again from Catalyst Chicago, writes about education and other things, and we're going to be talking about education today. So, Sarah, I'm glad you're here. Mm-hmm. And also, we're very honored to have a distinguished guest with us. Not that these aren't distinguished.
Now he's teeing me up.
A really distinguished guest, because we have Rod Sierra joining us. Rod is a member of the Chicago Public Schools Board, one of the people who cast that unanimous vote yesterday to raise your taxes. He's one of the people who did
it.
Thank you,
Ken. And my taxes,
and yours,
by the way.
and mine.
That's right.
Yeah. So we'll have lots to talk about on the program today. But let's start with that 100 days thing. There are people standing out on Michigan Avenue handing out their, for a quarter, I'll give you my reaction to the 100 days. 7-Eleven has a, it's just, everybody's got their 100 days report card on the mayor. He brought this upon himself. He decided that he wanted this kind of accountability. And so what we've seen is a kind of peacock strutting situation where you have these big boards with everything being checked off and not checked off, and reporters saying, no, it was really wasn't checked off. Nora, a public relations professional and a media analyst, was this the right thing to do strategically?
As a communications person, I can see the value in it. I mean, the 100 days is sort of an artificial moment in time. It's usually something that presidents do. Right. But the mayor felt that he had done a number of things.
Well, he's presidential. So.
And he, his communications people and Rob, who knows how that conversation went, said, hey, let's do the 100 days because we want a moment in time for the media to come out and talk about what's been happening. So it's not a bad communication strategy. I mean, I see why they did it. He has done a number of things. I think, the immediately slashing $75 million, dealing with the food deserts. I mean, these are just a couple things that were talked about and checked off the list. This is great. I love to cross things off the to-do list as much as anybody else. But the city has a lot of problems. And we obviously have a long way to go. And there are a number of issues that still need to be addressed. And I think, we're not even close yet.
But doesn't it invite, though, the nitpicking responses that you see in the media where people are saying, well, food deserts, but all you really did was have a couple of meetings and you're checking that off? I mean, come on, you didn't actually solve these problems. Most of these things are, the objective is to begin the conversation about, or to plan, to bring a group together to plan maybe doing it sometime in the future. So that's pretty low-hanging fruit. Would be easy to an easy description of this stuff.
I think it's true, but I think they felt like they had at least gotten started on enough things that if I were the communications person, I might have said, let's show them all the different issues that we've started to make progress on. So they obviously felt like it was worth the risk of the nitpicking to say, hey, we're on it.
I think, Ken, it's a good strategy in that this mayor needed to set himself apart from the last mayor, who was in office for 21 years. And people kind of got used to, I don't remember his name.
None of us can remember
Dick,
his name.
Rich. He needed to set himself apart from that administration and all that mayor had done, and from people who had gotten used to this is the way we do business.
Right.
We're going to do what we're going to do, and we'll let you know later. It became very sort of entrenched in the entire bureaucracy of the city and beyond. Voters got used to that way of doing business.
Well,
and I think he wanted to set a different
approval,
tone. He wanted to set a different tone. He may end up being the same type of mayor,
right.
But I think he wanted to set the tone that says, look, I'm accountable to you. You elected me. Here are some things I want to get done. They're big. They're meaty. Yeah, really probably none of them have really been checked off the list. You're right, but it's a place to start the conversation in all of these different, very important
And it is
areas.
very different. Richard M. Daley
Absolutely.
would never have put out a list of things I'm going to do
Right,
because it's
right.
like, when I do them,
From
I'll
that
tell you.
standpoint, I think it was a good idea, and it's the right thing to do from that standpoint. I
One
believe.
danger, though, is that for right now, you know, Rom and all his people, they can blame everything on the past administration.
Yeah,
and
you
as
can
soon as you
always do
start
that.
putting out some lists, then you're starting to take it on to your own accountability.
right,
and I mean,
right.
they probably had another 6 or 7 months where they could blame the past guys. And so, you know, now we're going to start saying, well, you checked it off your list, so we're going to start
Where
blaming
is it?
you.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, where's
so,
the beef? Yeah.
Right.
By the way, for our viewers, I think it's always important to mention that I mention it frequently on the program. I used to work for Mayor Daley, so did Rod Sierra. We actually worked together
we
in the
admit to
mayor's
that.
press
Yes, we do,
office for a
yes.
couple of years, so we've known each other for a long time. And if it sounds like it's maybe a little overly familiar, it's because we kind of are. But somehow or other, Rod managed to get out of the press office, do other things, and then end up on the school board. So
Yes, I did.
I guess I offer my
Thanks to Mayor Emanuel, I guess.
Yes. I offer my qualified congratulations to you for taking the job, and my thanks for doing it. One of the things, Sarah, that the mayor is claiming is that, and we were having some fun with this, I kid the mayor, but we were having some fun with this the other day, that a part of the justification for this tax increase is that, you know, I came in, I looked at the bureaucracy, I fixed it. The bureaucracy is much better than it ever was before. And I, at the risk of repeating myself, I was saying the other day that it's a bit like Oprah, the Onion headline about Oprah loses her 1,000th pound. We have cut the probably $7 billionth dollar from the bureaucracy of the city of Chicago. If you've been around as long as I have, you've seen this come and go for 30 years. It's like, well, the first thing we're going to do is cut the bureaucracy. Oh, we found $75 million in the bureaucracy. That's done, that's fixed. What you never see, Rod, is you never see the press release of saying, we're adding $25 million back into the bureaucracy. How does it get back in there? I don't know. But Sarah, in terms of the 100 days thing, put it in that perspective.
Well, you know, what he did, or his people at the school board, the school district, they've announced that they're going to make cuts. Now, a good portion of those cuts have not actually been made. They're still waiting for some forensic audit that's going to tell them where to make, I think, 100 of the 400 million that they're saying that they're going to cut. Which actually, I mean, I think it's sort of a question for the board members to approve a budget, you know, on the promise that you're going to cut. I mean, what if they don't? What if they don't lay off what if they don't find $100 extra million in savings? Then what? Then is our budget going to be totally just imbalanced and we're going to have huge problems?
I think the point is that they have a variety of areas from which they can cut that $100 million, and so it's not a matter of finding it; it's a matter of figuring out which is the area where you can do it.
You have no doubt that it's
without
there.
affecting the schoolrooms, or at least as possible affecting the schoolroom, the classrooms, and students. So yeah, I do believe it's there. Number one. Number two, when you approve a budget, I mean, you're approving a budget based on all sorts of assumptions. You know, you're assuming your revenue is going to be this, you're assuming that one's going to happen, you're assuming the outcome of negotiations is going to be that. So a budget is just that. It's a set of figures, numbers that's based on lots of assumptions that are moving targets. That's why you get into a situation where last year, at this time, they were talking about a $600 million deficit or something. They ended up with a surplus last year. Well, guess what? Some things happened that they weren't expecting, and they ended up with a surplus. Good for them. I don't think that's going to happen this year.
Not this year.
Or any year in the foreseeable future, because there are some really critical structural problems within the school district and, quite frankly, within government in the city and state and the country that need to be addressed if you're really going to fix the long-term outlook of public education.
We should just, for the viewers, just go over the basic numbers. I think we're probably all in agreement on this. The budget you passed yesterday was about $6 billion, right? About 5.9 billion. It included in it, built into it was a deficit of about $700 million, which was addressed with several things. About $400 million in cuts, the tax increase, which is about $150 million,
$1.61 a week.
$1.60. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So
I'll give up a cup of Starbucks
$1.61
to help my kids have better schools.
Sounds like
I'm all for that.
the old days in public radio fundraising. $1 a week. I mean, come on, that's nothing. $52. Come on. Yeah.
I don't have a mug to give you.
That's right. And of course, we're talking about $84. Somebody came up with this number that's the average for which a taxpayer
that's
will
where I get
will
the
be dinged.
$1.61 a week.
Right.
I did further math on that.
I see.
on
Okay.
that number.
And of course, that's based on the idea
This is
that
built off of my days in the mayor's press office.
Yeah,
That's 84 is a lot. Let's break that down a little bit more, can we? Let's see,
and
that's
that is based on the idea that,
$4.52 a month, $1.61 a week, less than a quarter a day.
and that's based on the presumption that your house is still worth $2.25 or
Well, that's true, too.
$250,000 or something.
Right.
Your house probably worth
Right.
$180. So
That's right.
yeah. But we joke. So, what, Sarah? Help me out here. What does this mean to you as a budget? I mean, is it making sense to you?
I think the administrative cuts, there certainly are places where there's many layers of bureaucracy in CPS, and there are probably places where you can find cuts. I think there's some of the things that you do hear principals who say, I don't know who to call because there's 7 people doing the same general job. So there's some of that consolidation that can be done. There's a lot of programs out there. Which ones work, which ones don't work. I'm sure there's ones that we could probably lose and not lose too much. Though a lot of the programs that they are cutting, kids will feel the pain. I mean, when you cut an after-school program, the kids that were going to the after-school program, it's not going to kill them, it's not going to destroy their education, but this is something that maybe their parents counted on. Tutoring is very high cost, and if it's an academic-based after-school program, they are gonna feel the pain. Schools actually, even though they said they kept the cuts away from the classroom, there is a fair amount of cuts going into the schools. I mean, what they did is they cut things that were not teacher allocations, but there's a lot of other money that schools get that were trimmed back. I did an analysis comparing this year's schools budgets to last year's projected budgets, and on average, schools are losing about $500,000. Now,
School?
Each. Now, some are losing a huge amount more, and so it sort of throws off the balance. So some aren't losing as much. I did a story that only two special education schools that deal with kids with emotional disturbances are seeing huge cuts. Now, they had huge budgets because educating those children or providing them a good education is expensive.
It's more expensive than.
So they could, but they saw big cuts. A lot of schools are saying that they're having to take away security guards, or they're having to, reshuffle various of the sort of supplemental staff, which, in school, supplemental staff, it sounds like, oh, well, that's just somebody extra. There's not really a whole lot of extra people just hanging out in schools. I mean, I'm in a lot of schools. Most schools these days are all hands on deck. So there is going to be some pain. I mean, maybe there still will be, on average, only 28 kids in a classroom, which is a lot anyways. But there is some pain out there in the schools.
Now, one of the
I wouldn't argue that point, by the way. There is going to be pain in the schools. There's going to be pain across the board. But this isn't easy, and people are going to have to, for instance, at the school levels, if they're losing money, their principals are going to have to get better about how they use their resources and how they're managing the schools. And that's been one of the CEO's main efforts, is talking to principals, working with principals, helping to give them the tools they need to run those schools like a business, to take costs out, that is waste or inefficiencies, and to better use what they do have, the resources that they do have available to them. So it's going to be tough. I don't think anyone's kidding themselves, and certainly no one over at the board, I think, is like this about the pain. It's going to be tough to get through, but there are essential steps we need to take, and that gets back to fixing the structure, because we're not going to cut our way out of the deficits that are forthcoming, and we're not going to tax our way out of the deficits that are forthcoming. I think Tim Cawley said yesterday, the chief administration officer over there, that you could fire everyone in this building 3 times, and you're still not going to.
4, I thought he said.
4, did he say?
4.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm already reducing that number.
Yeah.
4 times, and you're still not going to cover the deficit that's looming in 2014. So they are big issues that there is going to be some pain around in the classroom and far beyond.
But at the same time, Mr. Brizard is talking about extending the school day. We haven't even gotten to we've been burying the lead here. This is the big story: is 90 more minutes a day, 2 more weeks of the year, and then miraculously, he also came up with this idea that maybe we could start it a little bit early, and he kind of drops it on Chicago Tonight, and
He didn't do it here with you? You want me to talk to him about that, Candy?
I feel really bad. We hadn't invited him.
Tell him to give me a call
Oh, you
before
haven't
he does
invited
that.
him.
No,
Well, then you have
this
yourself only to
inferiority
blame.
complex.
That's because they knew you were coming.
We always let Chicago Tonight have it first. It's just this one. No, this is. I want to go down this little side street here for a moment before we get back to this. One of the things we talk about incessantly on this program, in fact, is optics and public relations and the way that things are handled. And we've observed in the past that, for example, the 4% rescission was handled, in my opinion anyway, was handled brilliantly by giving the schools their budgets first and saying, oh, by the way, we're not going to cut your gym class, and oh, we'll still be able to have a little bit of music here. And the principals breathing a sigh of relief and saying, wow, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then it's like, oh, but of course that means you're not going to get the 4%.
Right.
And then when the teachers union starts to react to this, the field has already been biased against them. It's like, well, wait a minute, you're not going to get your raise so that my kids, Well, I thought, and this is my own personal opinion, but I thought they did the same thing yesterday, because today in the Sun-Times, Roz Rossi has a quote from Becky Carroll. She says, she's the spokesperson for the board, saying the offer had been discussed internally, but then Brizard, in the moment, quote unquote, popped it out on Channel 11. It just got this idea while he was visiting Channel 11. If you believe that,
Yeah.
I've got a school board that you can buy for your $1.86.
You cannot buy the school board.
Right. No,
Let me make that perfectly
but
clear.
let me say that in a begrudging way, as a guy who's done a lot of PR work in his life, I think that's just absolutely brilliant. What you do instead of going to the teachers union, which is what Karen Lewis said they wanted them to do, and say, here, how about this 2% thing so you start 6 months early, so that they could just say no and bury it. You put it out there first, and you have the public talk about it and the press talk about it for a news cycle, and then the teachers union is reactive, and they're saying, but we don't like it, it's not enough money. And then they look kind of,
And at the
look
very
kind of
same
foolish.
time he was talking on Chicago Tonight, they're meeting in their House of Delegates meeting across town. They didn't wind up voting to terminate the contract. The issue actually never came up, but they had threatened that.
Right.
So you had these two, dynamics. So then, CPS gets their story out. Okay, we're going to offer them. We
Right.
are going to offer them more money. Well, I really think that it is brilliant, public relations wise. And let me tell you, press people were given kind of a heads up to watch Chicago Tonight.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
So,
So we're breaking a little bit of news here on our own show today. Yeah. Are you scooping yourself on that? Sorry.
well, I mean, I'm just saying, and usually
They wanted you to hear all the great things that he was going to
Mr.
say
Brizard
about
was gonna say, that's right.
restructuring the classrooms
right.
and being focused on kids. And
Right.
And
right.
that's one of the things that I will say about this whole, I think it stems from Emmanuel's administration, that this is a very press savvy sort of operation.
I'll say.
And when they talk about transparency, it's transparency to what they want you to know. There are some issues out there with the press that we're trying to navigate that is even different than, Daley was kind of like, well, we're not going to open the door, but if you find your way in, you're,
Happy hunting.
right. I mean, and he didn't really care what you
This is
found.
all wrong. This is wrong. You're talking to two people who used to work in Daly's press
Is that
office.
true though? Is that kind of the word about?
Well, I
mean,
think he
that's
cared what you found. He wanted to shoot the guy who let you in the door.
That's true. Maybe that's true, but I don't know. I mean, you got the feeling that people that that they were somewhat responsive. I mean, even the last Monique Bond, who people complained about right and left, you know, she was the last spokesperson for Chicago
CPS,
Public Schools. She had, you know, this is the difference between her. She was equitable with press. So she didn't, this press is very strategic in who they tell what to when. So they have a hierarchy of press. Who, you know, which audience do we want to get this information?
I was just going to say, from a communication standpoint, going back to how this was brilliantly sort of just mentioned on Chicago Tonight, this is a great idea. Thinking about who's just popped out. Who's the audience that you have to convince? Who's the audience that has the power to make the change happen that you want to happen? So it's not just, you know, is it the teachers union? Is it the principals? Is it, you know, the gym teachers, whoever it may be? Is it the Tribune? Is it Catalyst? You know, where does the media fall on that hierarchy of audience as well? And it's very, very savvy.
Chicago Tonight would have been, so if you were sitting, if you were having your little strategy meeting, you'd say, let's pop it on Chicago Tonight. Let's let it pop out on Chicago Tonight. Even though Chicago Tonight may not be the most viewed thing,
it's a certain group of
influentials
people
are there,
that watch
and the
Chicago
demographics
Tonight.
are right, and everything else. Yeah. So we have another issue, of course, which is that the health care and pensions are what's driving up the deficit for next couple of years. And I was really fascinated to see that there are 2,000 fewer teachers in the system today, and yet the cost is higher than it was 3 years ago, and that's because of the step and lane increases and everything else. And you also, I mean, you just have so many of these built-in costs that don't seem to have any relief. Pension, and you have a federal government and a state government that have just kind of checked out.
That's for sure. And the pension issue is huge, Ken. I mean, I also serve on the Chicago Teacher Pension Fund Board, appointed by the school board, with Andrea Zopp as the two CPS members, and we've had 2 meetings. The fund is doing great. They're seeing great returns and all, but the problem is it's underfunded, like almost every pension fund in the country is right now. And that has mainly to do with what you just said, the drying up of funds from the federal level and the state level. And so, you know, back in '95 when school reform passed and there was all this kind of shifting of responsibilities and who would pay what, you know, there were agreements that the state would put in a certain amount. Well, that's kind of gone away. And the school board has had a reduction in what they were paying for the past 3 years. They went down to the legislature and got that so that they could have a little relief, but that doesn't mean they don't have to pay it.
Right.
So, you know, in 2014, we're looking at a $600 million payment to the pension fund. Well, you know, no one in their right mind is going to think that all of a sudden there's going to be $600 million sitting somewhere to contribute to the pension fund. So what are you going to do? And that gets back again to the structural changes that need to be made in order to address that issue, because it is a huge one and it's looming, and 2014 is around the corner. And is that an election year or the year after an election year? You tell me, but doesn't
matter anymore.
They'll all be thinking about that as and how they're going to solve that as we get into another election year.
And I also wanted to offer congratulations to Oliver Seacat, is that his name? Who's the portfolio officer, but he's from charter school background, and he has the dubious job of trying to figure out which schools are surplus. That's another amazing number to me.
Beyond which schools are surplus, more importantly, I think what his job is to figure out is what makes sense, but to take a 30,000-foot view of the system and what makes sense in terms of moving forward with schools and where your schools are placed and the needs that they're serving, because right now it's all out of whack.
Well, this is one of these things where you think you know this stuff and then you see a number that just kind of whacks you across the face. I had no idea. I didn't write it down, but it's something like nearly 40% of the elementary schools are
50% under-enrolled.
So
underutilized.
we're just running all these empty seats out there.
I mean, that's I've been kind of beating this drum for quite a while, but
you won. See, they're listening to
I
you
know.
now.
I'm saying.
Right.
Maybe he should hire you. Are you looking to jump to the dark side? We did.
But I'm saying that it's incredible. It is really incredible, and it's actually like you start to feel, you go out to schools and you see so many schools that entire floors, entire sides of buildings are just empty.
But Ken, and here's where the politics comes into play, right? Because we live in a highly politically charged city.
Right.
And it's, you know, not my school, and the aldermen and the community groups and the parents. I mean, it's just, nobody wants to take that hit, but someone, if you're going to look at it and fix it, you have to. You have to figure out.
We don't want our garbage routes cut. We don't want anything cut, but we want our taxes.
Right.
You know, guys, I just want to. We have Nora with us today, and Nora has some expertise on this that I want to get in the last couple of minutes we have in the show. The situation with the Burge potential settlement for that, you've been covering this. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the city is going to settle on Burge, and do you think Mayor Daley will have to be deposed?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, and yes.
I think I've worked with the MacArthur Justice Center for years doing their communications, and I think that there are a few outstanding cases, Tillman, Kitchen, Cannon, to name a few, that the city could settle on. And that would get those cases out of the news because, you know, Mayor Emanuel and everybody at the city wants this over with as soon as possible.
Yeah,
it's been just nothing but bad for them. At the same time, you probably saw on the same day that Daley got listed as a defendant, which was huge because they haven't been able to get him listed as a defendant on some of these other cases. There was this amicus brief filed by, you know, former Governor Thompson and a number of big names because there are 15 men in prison who have very, very good claims that they were tortured and then that their confessions were based on that torture and that's why they're in prison. They all need new hearings. And that's a different matter. The city can't settle those cases because they actually need to start over. They need to have hearings and we need to see what comes out of it. So it's not going to go away immediately even if they settle the pending cases.
So the mayor still could be deposed then?
And I think the mayor will be deposed. I think, you know, the ruling was very clear. We'll see if there can be some legal juggling that happens. You know, I'm not an attorney, but the way it's looking right now, I think he will be deposed and we'll have to talk about what happened during his time as mayor when, you know, there was this, he's accused of being involved in cover-up and conspiracy to, you know, cover up what happened. It's huge. It
really is huge.
And this has
and
been
Flint
a huge
Taylor
case.
might be the guy who does it.
Yes.
Which is even
Boy,
huge.
he came out swinging in the press.
Yes, he did.
Flint
yes.
is not afraid to get out there and see what's on his mind.
Yeah. Well, guys, I've just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I wish we had another half hour to keep going because there's just so much to talk about. But maybe we'll give Mark Brown the
Don't forget
last.
back to school, September
Back to school,
6th. First
September
day,
6th.
get your kids to school on time.
Let's give Mark Brown the last
Will do.
word. Mark Brown, talking about the 100 days, said, I think Mayor Emanuel's biggest accomplishment is that he's earned the benefit of the doubt. And
That's true.
I think that really,
That's big.
and he's also earned whatever it is, 78% approval rating early on, so he must be doing something right. That's gonna do it for us here today. Hey, Steve Jobs, thanks for everything you've done. The tools you've created have been the instruments of my enslavement, and I thank you for the enslavement because it's so much fun being chained to one of your machines. The best to you and your family. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. Of course, you can find us here. You know that all the time. You can see this and other programs online at cantv.blip.tv. Check us out there. You can subscribe on iTunes, video and audio podcasts using that iTunes thing. Thanks, Steve. I'm Ken Davis. We'll catch you next time here on Chicago Newsroom. Thanks for joining us.